Subscribe our channel and press the bell icon for watching more video.
In this lesson, we will learn how to do HTTP requests using Python. First, you should understand what is an HTTP request. Well, you may be familiar with HTTP from website URLs. HTTP is the main transfer protocol used in the web. When you type an address in your web browser, you're actually sending an HTTP request to a server, which usually will respond with the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code for the page you requested. Your browser will then interpret the code and render the web page. But HTTP requests are not used only for getting web pages. We can use it to send and receive data. Let's see the basic flow of an HTTP request. In step 1, the client prepares an HTTP request. The client can be a web browser, a mobile app, a software, or our Python program. Then the request is sent to a web server. The server will get our request and may search for the data on a database. Then the server sends a response back containing some information about the request and also the data we requested. The data could be, for instance, information about a customer, a list of blog posts or pictures, or it could be the search results like we have in Google. Then the client will process the data and display it to the user, like Google shows a list of links with titles and descriptions. If you search for a hashtag on Instagram, it will get the data from a server and display images. So this is basically how HTTP requests work. To make HTTP requests in Python, we will need the requests module. So I'll just go to the terminal and I'm going to write pip install requests. Now let's go back to the idle and import requests. I'm not going to rename it this time. Now I'm going to create a variable and I'm going to assign requests dot get. Let's make the requests to Google's web page. So https://www.google.com, which is exactly what our browser does when we go to Google's web page. So we just sent a request using the get method. The main methods for HTTP requests are get and post. I won't go into details here, but you can read more about the get and post methods if you would like. So now that we sent our request, let's check the status code. So r.status code. So here it says 200. You can also search on Google for HTTP status codes if you want to know them all, but the most important ones are 200 for OK, which means the request has been sent and received successfully. 403 for forbidden, which means, for example, that you didn't send authentication correctly, or maybe it was missing an API key. Since Google's front page is public, we don't have to send authentication. We also have 404, which is the widely known status code for not found. So as we can see, our request was successful. Now we can print the headers of the request. This will show some information about the request. So r.headers, and this is going to bring us some information about the request. We can get specific information if we want by typing it like this. Now let's go to the most important part, which is the actual response to our request. So the data we just requested. So let's type r.text. We have 102 lines on the response, so it is not showing. You can just double click this message and then it is going to show. What you are seeing here is all the HTML code for Google's front page, which is exactly what the browser gets when it sends an HTTP request to google.com. Pretty cool, right? Of course, this is a bit hard for us to read, but our browser can interpret the code and render the web page beautifully. So now, what do we do with the HTML code from Google? Actually, this is not going to be very useful for us. But now that we know the basics of HTTP requests, we are going to get some data from APIs through the web, and things will start to get interesting. That's what we're gonna do in the next video. I'll see you then. In this lesson, we will send HTTP requests to get data from APIs. API stands for Application Programming Interface. APIs are behind most apps you have on your phone and web pages you visit. Like, for example, when you're on Facebook, it uses an API to get the list of posts to show on your newsfeed. I won't go into the details of how APIs work, but I encourage you to search about APIs and RESTful APIs, a very important topic nowadays. The biggest web companies today, like Google, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, PayPal, Udemy, and so on, provide APIs for developers to use. If I want, for instance, to display Twitter's trending topics on my Python program, I don't have to hack it, I just need to send a request to Twitter's API. So anytime you need to do something like this, you can just type, for example, Twitter APIs. And you will see that the first search result is a website called developer.twitter.com. If you go here, you will have all the information you need about how to use Twitter's APIs. You can do the same thing for Facebook. And as you can see, Facebook also has a web page called developers.facebook.com. You can also try Google. And here you have developers.google.com/APIs Explorer. I encourage you to read a bit more about it, especially Google's APIs, because there are many interesting things we can do with them. I may return later in the course to show an example of how those APIs work. For now, let's use a simpler example that won't require authentication. Let's say I want to develop a quizzing game in Python. I want to present to users questions about different subjects like movies, sports, history, and see if they can answer. I could create my own questions, but that would be a lot of work. So why not search for an API we can get questions from? So let's write quiz API. So here we have one called OpenTriviaDB. This is the one we are going to use to make our game. So we can see examples here. So let's select one question. Let's pick a category. Let's say music. Let's get an easy one. And let's select multiple choice. Now let's generate API URL. So this API URL is the one we are going to use to send our HTTP request to. Let's copy this and open it in the web browser to see what we have. What you're seeing here is the response to that request in the JSON format. You may be seeing something different, and this is because I have a Chrome extension called Json View. Let me just turn it off for a moment and refresh the page. So this is most likely the way you're seeing it in your computer. So like I just said, this is a JSON. Since we're going to be working with JSON a lot, I encourage you to get the Chrome extension I just showed you. For that, you can just go to Google and type Chrome extension Json View. And then you can just click in the Install button. Since I already did it, I'm just going to turn it on again. So this way it is much easier to understand the structure of the response. Now it would be good if we could convert this JSON to a Python dictionary we could work with. This is possible, and it is exactly what we would do in the next lesson. I'll see you then. In the previous lesson, we made an API request and we received the response in JSON. And what is JSON? JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It is probably the most popular data format on the internet today. All the most important programming languages like Java, Python, C#, JavaScript, PHP, and so on can work with JSON. And what is this object notation from JavaScript? Actually, a JavaScript object is the same thing as a Python dictionary. It could also be a list, but normally we will work with a dictionary-like object. So as we can see, the response is a list of key-value pairs. So we have the first key, which is the response code, and then we have another key, which is the results key, and associated to this key, we have a list. This list only has one element, which is a dictionary. So we have the category of the question, the type, the difficulty. We have the question itself, the correct answer, and the incorrect answers. Now let's copy this URL and let's get it in Python by sending an HTTP request. So import requests. So by the status code, we can see that our request has been sent successfully. Now let's print the text, which is exactly the same thing we were seeing in our web browser. Now let's get the type of this response. And as you can see, this is a string. So JSON is an object converted into a string. And because almost all programming languages have the string data type, we can work with JSON with all of them. All we need to do is parse the string. For that, we are going to use an internal module in Python called JSON. So import JSON. Now let's create a variable called question, and let's use a method of the JSON module called loads, which is going to convert from JSON or string into a Python dictionary. So let's get the r.text and convert it into a dictionary. Now if we print the question, it seems to be the same thing, but if we get the type of it now, it's now a dictionary. This is still a bit hard to read, so we could go back to the browser and use Json View to understand this object before we use it. But remember I told you that for pretty much anything we want to do in Python, there will be an external module to help us. In this case, there is one called pprint that will print an object in a readable way. So I'm just going to type pip install pprint in the command line. Now you can import pprint and use pprint.pprint and the dictionary you want to print, which in this case is inside the question variable. Now this is way easier for us to read. We can get specific values. So how could we get the category, for example? We could type question, and now we can see that question is a dictionary. So what we want is inside the results key. So question, results. Results is a list. We can see by the braces. So what we want is inside the first element, which is the index 0. And now we just want the category key. So this way we just got the category. We could do the same thing for the incorrect answers, for example. And we would have the list back. Now it's up to our creativity how we're going to present the question to the user and check if the answer is correct. And this is going to be our next exercise. But before we finish, let me just show you how you can convert a Python dictionary to JSON. So let's create a quick dictionary called person. Just gonna make a key called name. And one called age. Now I'm going to create a variable called person.json, just so I can store this dictionary in JSON format. And for that, I'm going to use a function called dumps, which is going to do the opposite of what we just did. So json.dumps, and here we pass the dictionary or list or any value we want to convert into JSON. Now we have it in JSON. So if we get the type, we will see that this is a string. So it is our dictionary converted into a string. Alright, so this was all for this lesson. I'll see you in the next video.